Step Into My Office is a podcast filled with real conversations and interviews about entrepreneurship. Hosted by the founders of 135 Agency and built with Black women in mind. If you like us, leave us a review and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. Now let's start the show.
Hi, guys. Welcome to Step Into My Office. My name is Septosa Foster, managing partner of 135th.
Hi, I'm Shantae Bacon-Seas, serial entrepreneur, CEO of 135th, and Eloise and Ethel.
Today's show is something that we go through, Shantae and I. We talk about every day. We live it every day. And this is the truth about diversity in business. And so, I mean, I'm sitting next to Shantae. She's like bursting at the seams. Diversity is not always in play when we are up for opportunities, but
it's usual bullshit. Let's talk about this thing.
Okay. All right. But first, I know you don't like doing this, but what is diversity? Define diversity.
Diversity means variety. It means different options. That's it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the concept is on, right? If diversity was not industrialized, it'd be great because we do need more variety in everything that we do in this country. For so long, everything in this country was one-sided. And, the word minority implies that there's more of another group and less of these other folks. And so, that's where diversity came from. And great intentions. Execution, we're still waiting on it.
Well, I feel like diversity, when people hear that, it's a code word for handout. Mm-hmm. Just like people sort of associate affirmative action as, oh, this is something I'm obligated to do for people who don't work hard enough for it, or, who are always asking for an easy way out. Just like how we have grown to look at welfare or public assistance as, something that, we have to do. And I'm really talking from a person who is in power and in terms of how they view, or just the industry. And it only feels like that because when we, talk diversity with our peers or with people in business who are not of color, there is a sense of groan, okay, yeah,
mm-hmm. You're checking a box.
We're checking a box because we don't want to get in trouble. It's
we don't want to get sued.
Right. And it looks good to act like we care about diversity, but really it's kind of a burden to us.
Right. So there's a few things about diversity. So the first, if you're anybody who's had a 5-minute conversation with me before, then you know that I believe that I believe that diversity is bullshit. I'm not the only person who believes that, but I'm very vocal about it because I feel like we're never going to get to a solution if we don't have real conversations. You can also, Ava DuVernay, when she did the op-ed for, I think it was Hollywood Reporter or Variety, or she was in an interview, and she said the same thing. She was like, I just think that the effort as a whole, it just corporatizes something that the execution can't be right once it becomes an industry, because then it has the same demons that industry does. And so, last year I was at the Forbes Idea Summit, and there was the last panel of the day. It was Michaela Angela Davis, Jesse Williams from Grey's Anatomy, and Christopher Gray. And they were all like, yeah, with this diversity thing, like as if they hire someone who can see something that the rest of us can't. And that was a creative's way of saying, it just should not be something that is so corporatized, industrialized. And really, I think that the way that they went wrong was affirmative action kind of evolved into this diversity, the modern day diversity industry. And so back then when, you had to have, it was a legal situation where you had to have affirmative action as a bill to force people to hire people of color, then it would make sense to be a function of HR that we need to start here. But 40 years later, we can't still be a function of HR. Mm-hmm. Now diversity has to get promoted and escalate up the ranks into the executive office. You automatically know when a company is full of shit when diversity is only a function of a HR person who gets no respect from the service providers in the company, like the communications officer or the chief marketing officer or any other department is like, yeah, that's an HR person. and the executive office is miles away from where the diversity team is. At this point, companies are realizing that inclusion, which is, another way that they tried to freshen up the word diversity, but hiring people, they changed the draws and tried to make it just a little bit fresher. But the bottom line is that the mentality in a lot of ways, it just didn't change. There's some people who have realized that just going out and incorporating and selling to and marketing to or hiring people of color is just good business. That's a true intention. That is we're all one nation. We're stronger together than we are apart. And if you plan to make a profit in the marketplace, you need to speak to the marketplace. I mean, that shouldn't be rocket science. And you damn sure don't need an HR professional to tell you that. You should just say, hey, this is a for-profit business. We want to make money. Why are we not talking to everyone in the marketplace?
Right, but that just hasn't been the case. I mean, it is a double-edged sword because on one end, it doesn't feel genuine. A lot of efforts don't really feel genuine. It doesn't feel like the organization has really bought into this idea of diversity. But on the other hand, if you did not have this, there would be no diversity. There would be nothing because and that's what we've seen. It's like we have to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. And really it does. I mean, I've heard you talk about this before on panels. It really starts with the culture.
Yep.
It, sparking a sense of curiosity.
And it starts with the executive office.
Right.
Top down.
Right. There has to be a sense of curiosity about other cultures, about people who are different. Like this world does not accept difference. Mm-hmm. Everybody
That's human nature. It's very human to be in a bubble. You live
it's
and
human
work
to be in a
community.
Bubble. Well, we're not in a bubble.
Push
though.
yourself. No, yes, we are all in a bubble.
No, but
in our homes, in our community, in our department.
I'm talking
office.
about we are a community of people. We don't work in a vacuum. There are going to be. We have to deal with each other. If you are out, especially in the world of business, you have to deal with people who are not like you. We want to remain. We want to remain in our bubbles mm-hmm. because they're safe. They're familiar. We feel protected. But that's the problem. What happens in the culture is that difference is demonized.
It's
demonized. It makes it seem like you should be afraid of things that are different. That's xenophobia. Like you should be, you should only value what looks and feels and sounds and tastes and smells like you. And so when we take that mentality into the workplace mm-hmm. where people don't want to work with each other, different races or whatever. So
I disagree with that just a little bit.
I'm just saying, but in general, I mean, I don't. I worked in a corporate environment right out of college. And, everybody is, every company has their own culture, but there's a sense that you have to fall in line with the accepted way to dress, this accepted way to look. And I'm not talking about being completely out of the box or whatever, but when we have to legislate hairdos in New York, I think they just mm-hmm. passed a law that makes
braids
it illegal.
You
cannot fire people because they come in wearing braids or dreadlocks mm-hmm. or whatever. Like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, our instinct or the way that society is if you walk into the building, we don't want to look. We have one way that is acceptable about, to look, to act, to talk. And so if anybody is outside of those lines, it makes other people uncomfortable.
That's true. But, there's extreme cases, I think. And I feel like in the past 2 years with this new administration that the extreme cases have, I won't say that they've grown, but I'd say that they've been exposed more. But, one thing I will say is that for a lot of these organizations that lack diversity, one of the go-to excuses is, I'm not saying I don't want Black people. It's just that, I don't know any. Where do I go to find, talented people of color that can operate on this level? And so to me, what I hear when I get through the bullshit of those words is that they are in a bubble. Like, it's very human to be in your own bubble, to be in your socioeconomic circle, to be with the people who you can go and have a $25 glass of wine with every night, or to be with the people who you grew up with. I mean, that's normal. I mean, Black people do it. Everybody does it. You live in your neighborhood. That's your ecosystem, right? And so going outside of it requires a little bit more effort. But I think that it's no longer acceptable to say, I can't find them, because then all that does is set up the next series of lies. Like, well, I can't find them, so I'm going to go get this diversity person because they can find them. And then that person is now financially invested. So now that $250,000, $350,000 salary feels so good that, you're set up, and then it's human again to want to protect the bag. So now your whole bag is dependent upon not pushing people outside of their comfort zone and making them think radically different, but it's like dressing up the talking points that they just can't find talented people of color. So essentially what you have is a breeding ground that goes and recruits a bunch of HBCU students or lower level people of color who come in, which is very important. I'm not diminishing.
And you mean entry level?
Yeah, entry level is what I meant to say. I'm not diminishing that effort because I feel like it is so necessary that there's somebody who is out there recruiting people of color and bringing them in from the ground up and that kind of thing fresh out of school. That's fine. But that's been the diversity effort for the past 30, 40 years. There's something wrong when we look at upper leadership and it still looks like 2%, 3%, 4%. And that includes women and people of color. So if that's still the case, 40 years into the diversity industry, then there's a missing link somewhere because you bring in people at the bottom and they're not moving up. They're moving out because there's a lack of opportunity. There's a ceiling. There's frustration. There's so many people who come up to me after my panels and they're like, girl, you were speaking the truth. But not a single one of them feels free to tell that to their boss.
Because we're not
sometimes
owning anything.
Their bosses are in the room and hearing it.
Because in that environment, we don't have any power. We have very limited
and the
power.
Consequences. If they did communicate the same way I'm communicating right now, the consequences are dire and they're mostly financial. And they're like, I need to protect the bag. I got bills. I got kids. I want to keep my home. And that's what happens. It ends up being a cycle of vanity presentations and vanity events and things that don't actually solve the problem. And honestly, the biggest beneficiary of the diversity industry are white women. They're getting the bag right now. And a company considers themselves completely diverse if they have white women in the upper leadership levels. And I just feel like that's another piece of the diversity and inclusion industry that needs to be explored a little bit more. I don't think that I don't think they don't want to. I just think that the way that it's evolving and people are falling into these, patterns that no one's pushing it to say, is this true diversity in here? If, everyone is still in upper leadership, all the people who are at the table who have a say in how money is moved, if it's still mostly Caucasian. They don't have a solution for that. They're like, well, we let women in. We're diverse. You know what I mean?
That's why I said earlier, it is a double-edged sword because if companies are aware, not all, but when companies are aware that they have a diversity issue, the first thing they do is implement policy and they try to get people of color, women or whatever into the building. And there are challenges, I'm sure, with that because you can't be the person who, was completely unaware that you needed diversity and then wake up one day and say, all right, we're going to implement some policies and then expect it to go well. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a very frustrating element, but it is so closely tied to the culture of how we think and how we believe. But I'm wondering.
2019.
I know, but that doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of how people think about race. We are more divided now. Our administration, tends to stoke the fires of dissension in our country when it comes to race and diversity. So I don't.
That's true.
I mean, I know, but I'm just saying, this is a difficult situation. Is there anybody getting it right? Is there, or what is the right, what is the way to operate? Because I know it has to start obviously outside and education and people being, sort of more comfortable with, other cultures. I do see millennials as not having the same mentality about race, that we have as, not millennials, people in their 40s. But there has to be a path to getting it right, doing better.
So I think let's because when we talk about diversity and inclusion, I feel like we're doing it a disservice to put it through the lens of where we are right now with race relations. If we could rewind to October 2016, I feel like we would get an accurate assessment of what kind of successes and progress D&I has made, right? Because everything's inflamed now. Like, this is just, it's abnormal. I mean, there's so many people working to try to get us back to normal, but it's not normal right now. So I take a lot of these, white CEOs at their word that they're not purposely excluding Black people, but it's just like they're not in their ecosystem. They don't run into them. They don't know them. That's why they rely on diversity officers. But when you talk about like October 2016, where we were with diversity, it was the same as what I was just saying, that you have diversity officers who are empowered to bring in people of color, but still it's bottom heavy with people of color. When you look at the upper leadership, you just don't see it. And when you talk about, is there somebody getting it right? I could say my favorite, example of diversity is Sean Combs Enterprises. I mean, you've got Revolt and Sean John and all of these brands under one big brand, and you've got women CEOs and you've got male CEOs, but it's a lot of everybody in that company. I think that's done really well. I think that, but I also would say Google's getting it right. And the reason why I would say that is that, have they met the diversity numbers, targets that they have? Probably not. You're not going to fix it overnight, but do they have a sincere effort to bring people of color into senior positions and listen to them, hear them out, give them a platform, empower them to create? Yes. And not a lot of people are doing that. I mean, really, I can't think of a single other one. I think there's such a thought leader in this area. Like, we are getting this so wrong. Let's just listen and stop talking. And they're putting some effort and money behind it.
It can be right. Like,
right.
Diversity can work, but
it's not going to go through one person. It's not just, we got our chief diversity officer, and then they have a bunch of entry level HBCU grads in coordinator positions. No,
it really does have to be.
We're talking EVP, SVP.
It has to be integrated into the fabric of the organization,
and managing their own P&L and having their own budget, and not having to upsell and be a salesman internally to go pitch someone else to break off a piece of their budget for them to do something in diversity. That's just so disempowering.
Yeah. And there's this thing, I mean, I guess it's like the affirmative action of Hollywood inclusion writers, and making sure that, percentages of, your crew are Black women or men or a certain, from a certain orientation.
I hope those inclusion writers include publicists.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to.
Okay,
I was trying to get to that. The thing about diversity is that or the way that it's been sort of executed in business is it tends to address certain pain points, but not be very comprehensive. So, like you had referenced earlier, if we're hiring a bunch of entry level folks, but we're not promoting them to management level, then they
don't even stay in the company.
You're getting the entry level diversity, but they're not. But they're not going. They're not excelling in the company. They're not moving up. So the company's management and decision makers and people who are the check writers, it stays white male. Mm-hmm. And so the thing
and
with
female
but the thing with in Hollywood, if you're saying, I want diversity in front of the camera, and maybe a few behind the camera, but my accountants are not diverse, my publicists, my agents, my managers, all the people that can profit
the money.
Right. Then again, like it doesn't it doesn't go the whole gamut. I mean, that's definitely something that we face at 135th, where there really aren't a lot of agencies of our like us, like of our caliber that do what we do in our space of color. And it's very easy to be completely excluded from opportunities, or to have to scratch and fight for little crumbs, because when there is no mandate, when there is no energy, no urgency to be diverse at all levels, you can easily find yourself siloed. That's why
easily.
Ernest Dukes, who's a publicist, I became familiar with him because he wore a jacket on the back that said, "My publicist is black."
I posted that on my Instagram page.
Yeah, and so
got like 1,200 likes on it.
Yeah, and he was saying that from a Beyonce concert. He's works with Yvette Noel Shore, who's Beyonce's publicist, and the idea that that statement has to be made, but it's felt on a spiritual level by all of us publicists and marketers out here. It points to the problem that not a lot of Black talent in Hollywood or in other areas are choosing to work with Black publicists, Black agents, Black whatever, because of the idea that either our businesses are inferior, we don't have the relationships or whatever. And so
and we can't take them to where they want to go.
That has to change. That has to be a part of, talent, a decision maker or whatever has to say, okay, if I'm going to be adopting a diverse mindset, I'm going to go all the way. It's not just going to be about, what's the surface level. It's going to be about, I want to make sure that all of these businesses that are of color are getting money where applicable. Give us a shot. That's the other thing about diversity that I think is the stereotype, is that people think that businesses of color are asking for something that they don't want to earn.
Or they want you to lower their standards so you can work with them, which is some bullshit.
In our business, when we pitch for something, we don't come in entitled. We're not saying, hey, we're a Black business, so
please
you need to
our mistakes.
Hire us. We're saying we just want a shot. Can we bid for this? Can we pitch? Can we be included in the RFPs? Instead of, feeling like, we have to kind of knock on doors and be told constantly, it's already assigned, or it's already X, Y, and Z. So I don't know. I mean, that is the challenges of diversity. Sometimes it doesn't go too far.
Well, to what you just
or far
said,
enough.
To what you just said, I think it does. I mean, we do need a concerted, conscious effort, especially, I feel like what would be a great shot in the arm for the diversity or inclusion movement is if huge brand names in celebrity that are of color actually committed to that. They really don't realize how much power they have to change it. And that's usually because each person is on their solo mission, and no matter how successful they seem to us on the outside, they still consider themselves in the trenches, trying to get the next job, trying to get the next level, trying to get on network TV or do whatever they're doing. And so a lot of times the networks that are set up in certain industries are set up to squeeze people of color out, or not even, let me rephrase that, not squeeze them out, but not even consider them, not even factor them in.
Because they don't care.
The way it is that if you get an opportunity, let's say, we all know several people who are trying to act or trying to be on camera or be famous. You have this talent. You've been auditioning. You have your PhD in heartbreak and rejection. You finally get an opportunity. Now you can finally get like a real agent, like somebody who's playing on a real level. You get your agent. Now here they come and they're like, okay, here's my suggestions for who you should get as a manager, who you should get as an attorney, who you should get as a publicist. And it's all incestuous. These are all people who work together every day. They go from studio to the agency, back around and do the musical chairs. And it's a close-knit community that does not have a lot of diversity. So not even that they're saying, we don't recommend Black people, but they just recommend people that they know, because how could you recommend somebody you don't know?
Right.
It's just kind of natural. Right. And so there has to be some concerted effort that says, I want to proactively go support businesses that not just hire African Americans, but are owned by
Yeah.
Because if we don't own, and all you have to do is go back about a week or so, or maybe 2 weeks, and look at Diddy's Instagram timeline. And he posted something, Twitter timeline. He said, let's not look up and realize that we don't own our culture and our community. Let's not always be sold our own culture and community. Y'all better be looking at ownership and equity and how you get in on the bottom and stop giving it away. And that is what I feel like if we looked at Black Hollywood as a whole, that it's given away. I mean, they're making some great strides on camera and in the production programming side, and even with the Oscars, you saw production design, wardrobe, that kind of thing, getting recognition finally. But that's the first one out of God knows how many people who are in one. Like, it's just like, we can't, if you're still that Black person who's out there celebrating that you're the first in something, that's not where we need to be. In 2019, we can't have all of these powerful positions say, well, I was the first. Well, that's great. But to me, I hear tragedy when I hear that, because I hear millions of people who dreamt about being there who weren't able to reach those heights. And that's unfortunate. We have to stop celebrating the one brilliant Negro syndrome and realize that there are plenty of brilliant African Americans, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and that just being the one that's celebrated because you're you got the Queen Bee diversity gig, that's not cool.
Yeah.
It's not. We need to own.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a mindset. It's about changing and it's really about changing a culture. This is the culture that we live in. And for companies who have existed for centuries with, this country was founded on the idea that,
Blacks would work the plantations.
Well, Blacks weren't even full humans. So it's taking centuries to kind of still get out of that. And I don't think we're completely out.
Oh my God. However, no, oh my God. We're nowhere near out of it. The plantation just turned into giant global brands. And now you play your position and you're compensated much better.
Well, how can we, so let's given these plantations, how do we, as a small business owner, how can we implement diversity? Any businesses, what is the best way? And I can start by saying, number one, first of all, identify and objectively whether or not who your customer base is, and does your staff, does your organization reflect the diversity of your customer base? That's one thing. I assess where you are in your business, and have you ever considered, because I think diversity doesn't only, it never occurs to people until there's a crisis or some kind of criticism.
If you're going to be publicly shamed for it.
Right. So but I think of a self-reflection, asking yourself, are we doing enough? Does our business reflect our consumer base or our audience? I also think that you should consult with others, professionals who are, consultants on diversity issues, who have experience working with companies to see what is, where can we create a strategy that will better diversify our business, and also adopt a sense of, curiosity about somebody that's not like you.
Yes.
What in terms of, maybe I don't know everything. And that's a hard thing for an entrepreneur to
Entrepreneurs
admit.
have to admit that every day.
Yeah, but
daily,
a lot of them
hourly.
don't. A lot of them don't. A lot don't. People are not objective, about themselves, especially not about their business. It's because it's like it's a baby. You're not objective about your child. If you have a child,
I wouldn't know, but I just know that
I wouldn't either. But I'm just saying,
I know that constantly
in
you're
your
learning
mind,
what you don't know.
But listen, in your mind, your business is your baby. Well, it's not in your mind. Your business is your baby. And a lot of times we think that they can do no wrong. My business walks on water. My son walks on water. My husband, and so, but we have to, take a real sense of self-reflection. What are some of your tips on implementing diversity?
So implementing diversity as a small business, I'd like to not be hypocritical about this. So what I'm going to say is the same way you hear so much passion and fire about the fact that I don't think I have all the answers, but I do know when something's not working. And I would say that after 40 years, if you're still saying that the leadership numbers, diversity numbers are abysmal, that there's something wrong. There's too much money invested for you to still only have people at the bottom who can't reach higher heights. But as a small business, I'd like to say, what can I do to help diversity officers or people who have expressed a desire for inclusion? And as small business owners, there's two things we could do. Number one, whenever you're approaching a diversity person for a business, I know that I could go much deeper, and we'll do a whole nother episode about small business entrepreneurship and how the diversity platforms and these portals and registration and all of that, how those things can.
You mean applying as a diverse supplier in the corporate world?
Exactly. Applying as a diverse supplier. How, that I don't believe in as much as if you have an actual one-on-one relationship with a diversity officer. What you can do is always present your best, because the second that you stop short of your best, or you have a mentality of entitlement, or in any way risk how they are going to look, because you have to understand that the reason why they are kind of anxious, full of anxiety, is because they are constantly being judged and scrutinized and looked at for who they are and who they bring in and all of that in a setting that speaks to diversity, but the actions aren't there. So it's not like I think that they're full of shit and that and all of that. I think that the process has a lot of ways to grow, but I think as entrepreneurs, we can do our part. If you know you present your best and you bring value that they can proudly go in there and take, then it's up to them. The other thing I think as small businesses we could do to diversify is put your money where your mouth is. If you are an agency that's owned by African-American women of color like ours, and you have never interviewed a Caucasian candidate, or you've never worked with anyone other than young Black women, then you need to walk the talk. So you need to go out and find. One person challenged me probably a year ago, and she was like, well, how many white people have you had working here? And I could point to 3, I think, that I interviewed over the years, but and definitely, people who I have looked up to or whatever. But in terms of friends who will come over and, watch Scandal with popcorn and wine and that type of shit, or we talk about girlfriends and boyfriends, I literally couldn't come up with anything. And I was like, okay, yeah, we cannot be making a grandstand about the lack of diversity if we're not proactively going outside of our bubble to bring Caucasian folks in. We have to do that. I have plenty of friends who are of a Hispanic background. I have family that's Native American, but I really was at a loss for that one. And that was not cool to me, because, you have to be about something and put it in practice. So that's just a few tips, and diversity can be like a 10-part series. You'll definitely hear from us about this again.
So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back for our Black Girl Boss moment.
Hey you, love Step Into My Office? Subscribe now and leave us a review. Got a business question for Shantae or Saptosa? Use hashtag Step Into My Office. That's hashtag Step Into My Office. And if you have video or podcast production needs, visit verse2media.com. That's verse2media.com. Now back to Step Into My Office.
Right now, it is time for our Black Girl Boss moment.
Yay.
And it is someone we have all been in love with, Regina King. If you've been in love with her. Regina King since the days of Brenda, okay, like me, okay, Brenda was it on 227. So Regina King, where do I begin? Emmy and Oscar winning actress, producer, director. Her 227 co-star Marla Gibbs was her Black girl magic inspiration, and first boss lady that she saw in action of color. Has appeared in over 50 TV shows and movies, and we know her roster: 227, Boys in the Hood, Ray, The Boondocks, If Beale Street Could Talk.
She won the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for.
She won, and even better than the win was that Captain America jumped out of his seat to make sure that he walked that queen up the stairs. Okay, like he was like,
that Chris Pine?
Evans. Chris
Evans. Okay.
Jumped out of his seat like on that Captain America duty. Like, she's just looking too fabulous for me to let her have to move this dress. And has her own production company called Royal Ties. She, of course, is a champion for diversity in hiring in film production, of course, and vowed to hire at least 50% women for everything she produces over the next 2 years.
Love that.
And to me, a commitment to hire at least 50% women, that's just what she sees every day.
Yeah.
It's not like she has to work that hard to try to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good business. It affects the bottom line. And so I think that, let's sprinkle some black pixie dust in the air for all this black girl magic. Get it, Brenda?
I love her. Love Regina King.
Yes. So that is another episode of Step Into My Office. Thank you guys so much. This was a great, fun discussion. I could go on and on and on about diversity, and you guys know that. And you can subscribe to the podcast, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us at ONE35 Agency. Give all your feedback, the positive stuff, the negative stuff, the critiques, what you want us to talk more about, examples, other things, reasons why that the industry of diversity is bullshit. I'm fine with all of that. And shout out to Verse 2 for producing this podcast. Danya Blaze is hands down the best in podcast production. And we'll see you next time.
See ya. Bye.